The metal chair felt cold against Zethka's chitinous back as he shifted uncomfortably in the witness stand. His forearms trembled slightly, making the chains that bound his wrists rattle against the table. The Galactic Council chamber stretched out before him like a vast amphitheater, filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Their eyes, tentacles, and various sensory organs all focused on him with intense curiosity. Zethka had fought in 17 different star systems during his 30-year military career. He had seen plasma storms that could melt steel and faced creatures that could tear apart starships with their bare claws. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Nothing had prepared him to speak about the humans. Commander Vel Thorne sat at the center of the tribunal, her silver skin gleaming under the chamber's bright lights. Her 3 eyes blinked in sequence as she reviewed the documents spread across her desk. She was an Altarian, a species known throughout the galaxy for their fairness and wisdom. When she finally looked up at Zethka, her expression was both curious and concerned. "Warrior Zethka of the Vraxian 3rd Battle Fleet," she began, her voice echoing through the chamber's sound system. "You stand before this tribunal not as a prisoner of war, but as a witness. Your testimony today will help us understand the events that led to the ceasefire between your empire and the humans of Earth." Zethka's mandibles clicked nervously. The sound was loud in the quiet chamber, and he noticed several council members lean forward with interest. They had probably never seen a Vraxian warrior show fear before. His people were known across the galaxy as fierce conquerors who had never lost a war. "I understand, Commander," Zethka replied, his voice rough from years of shouting battle commands. "But I must warn you, what I am about to tell you will be difficult to believe." A low murmur rippled through the assembled council members. Vel Thorne raised one of her long, slender hands for silence. "We are here to listen, warrior. Please begin with your first encounter with human forces." Zethka closed his large, black eyes for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. When he opened them again, he seemed to be looking at something far beyond the council chamber walls. "It was 18 standard months ago," he began. "My battalion was part of the invasion force sent to secure the mining world of Kepler-7. Our intelligence reports said the planet was inhabited by approximately 50,000 humans, mostly farmers and miners. Civilians with no military training." He paused, his claws digging into the metal table. "We were told it would be an easy victory. The humans had no orbital defenses, no military bases, and only basic communications equipment. Our battle computers calculated that we would have complete control of the planet within 6 standard hours." "How many soldiers were in your battalion?" asked Vel Thorne. 200 of the Vraxian Empire's finest shock troops." Zethka replied with what might have been pride, if not for the haunted look in his eyes. "Each warrior was equipped with plasma rifles, energy shields, and power armor. We had air support, artillery, and enough firepower to level a small city." "And the human defenders?" Zethka's mandibles clicked again, faster this time. "According to our scans, they had hunting rifles, farming tools, and some old explosive devices used for mining. Their most advanced weapon was a communications array that was at least 20 years out of date." The council chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual hum of the air recycling system seemed muted. Everyone was waiting for Zethka to continue. "We began our assault at dawn," he said, his voice growing quieter. "Our dropships landed in the middle of their largest settlement, a place called New Haven Colony. The plan was simple. We would secure the town center, demand surrender, and process the civilians for relocation to work camps." He stopped talking and stared at his hands. The silence stretched on for nearly a full minute before Vel Thorne gently prompted him to continue. "What happened when you landed, warrior?" "Nothing," Zethka whispered. "At first, nothing happened at all. The streets were empty. The buildings looked abandoned. Our sensors detected human life signs, but we could not locate any organized resistance. It was too quiet. He looked up at the tribunal, his eyes wide with something that looked like terror. That should have been our first warning. No civilized species abandons their homes without a fight, but humans ... Humans think differently. How so? They had turned their entire settlement into a weapon, Zethji said, his voice growing stronger with each word. Every building, every street, every piece of farm equipment had been modified. They had been preparing for our arrival for weeks, maybe months. He began to pace back and forth in the witness area, his chains clinking with each step. The first attack came from below. They had dug tunnels under their own town, connecting every building to a network of underground passages. When we moved to secure the main street, explosives detonated beneath our feet. Casualties? Velthorn asked, making notes on her tablet. 12 warriors in the first 30 seconds, Zethka replied. But that was just the beginning. As we regrouped and called for medical evacuation, the real attack started. The real attack? Zethka stopped pacing and faced the tribunal directly. Sniper fire from the grain silos. Rocket-propelled grenades from the school building. Machine gun nests in the children's playground. They had turned everything we expected to be safe into a killing zone. The council members began to murmur among themselves. The Altarian ambassador leaned over to whisper something to Velthorn, who nodded grimly. But surely your superior firepower and training gave you the advantage? Velthorn asked. You would think so, Zethka said with a bitter laugh. But the humans did not fight like any enemy we had ever faced. They did not wear uniforms. They did not have ranks or formations. Old men and women fought alongside teenagers. Farmers used the same tactics as trained soldiers. He sat back down heavily, his armor creaking with the movement. I watched a human female, probably no more than 16 standard years old, charge, directly at our heavy weapons position. She had nothing but 2 grenades and a knife. She should have been terrified. Instead, she was screaming something about her little brother. Did she succeed in her attack? She took out 3 of my best warriors before they finally stopped her, Zethka said quietly. And while she was dying, she was still trying to throw her last grenade. Even with fatal wounds, she kept fighting. The chamber fell silent again. Zethka could see the expressions of shock and disbelief on the faces of the council members. They were beginning to understand what he had tried to tell them at the beginning. This was going to be difficult to believe. How long did the battle for New Haven Colony last? Velthorn asked. 14 hours, Zethka replied. 14 hours to secure a single town that should have fallen in 30 minutes. By the time we finally controlled the settlement, we had lost 43 warriors, nearly a quarter of my battalion. And the human casualties? Zethka's voice became barely audible. We found the bodies of approximately 200 civilians. Men, women, children, elderly. All of them had died fighting. We found weapons in the hands of humans as young as 12 and as old as 80. He looked directly at Velthorn, his eyes filled with something that looked like fear and respect combined. That was when I realized we were not fighting farmers and miners. We were fighting something far more dangerous. Which was a species that had turned warfare into an art form, Zethka said. A species that did not distinguish between soldiers and civilians, between battlefield and home, between victory and death. They fought like their entire world depended on that single town. Velthorn set down her tablet and leaned forward. Warrior Zethka, you have described a difficult battle, but hardly something that would cause the mighty Vraxian Empire to seek peace. There must be more to your story. Zethka nodded slowly, his mandibles clicking one final time. Commander, what I have told you was just the first day of a war that lasted 8 months. and every single day was worse than the one before. Commander Vel Thorn adjusted her position in the tribunal chair, her 3 eyes blinking in sequence as she studied the documents before her. The chamber remained silent, except for the soft hum of the translation devices working to convert Zethka's words into dozens of different languages for the assembled council members. "Warrior Zethka," she said finally, "your report mentions that New Haven Colony was only the beginning. Please continue with your next encounter with human forces." Zethka's forearms tensed against his restraints. He had been hoping to avoid this part of his testimony, but he knew the council needed to hear everything. His people's survival might depend on other species understanding what humanity was truly capable of. After New Haven, our commanders decided we needed a different approach, he began, his voice steady but quiet. They sent me with the 2nd Regiment to attack a larger settlement called Riverside Township. This time, we had 500 warriors, orbital support, and detailed intelligence about the human defenses. He paused, his large black eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. We thought we had learned from our mistakes. We were wrong. What made Riverside Township different? Asked Vel Thorn. The humans had 3 weeks to prepare after New Haven fell, Zethka explained. 3 weeks to study our tactics, our weapons, our behavior patterns. When we arrived, we found a settlement that looked completely normal from orbit. The alien warrior stood up slowly, his chains clinking as he moved to the center of the witness area. Riverside Township had been a farming community built along a river valley. About 8,000 humans lived there, mostly growing food for the mining operations in the mountains. Our battle computers calculated complete victory within 4 hours. But that did not happen, Vel Thorn stated rather than asked. "No, Commander. What happened there changed everything I thought I knew about warfare." Zethka began to pace again, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet chamber. "We landed our forces at dawn, just as we had at New Haven. But this time, the humans were waiting for us in the open. They had formed what looked like traditional defensive lines around their town center. That must have seemed more familiar to your forces." "It did," Zethka agreed. "We saw their barricades, their defensive positions, their weapons emplacements. Everything was exactly where our training manuals said they should be. We thought we finally understood how humans fought." He stopped pacing and faced the tribunal directly. The human commander was a man named Colonel Jake Murphy. He was old, maybe 50 standard years, with gray hair and scars on his face. He looked like a veteran soldier, someone we could respect and understand. Did he attempt to negotiate surrender? "No," Zethka said, his mandibles clicking softly. "He sent us a message on our command frequency. Just 4 words. Come and take it." Several council members shifted in their seats. The phrase had been translated into their languages, but somehow the simple words carried a weight that transcended the translation. "We began our assault with standard formation attacks," Zethka continued. "Artillery bombardment, followed by airstrikes, then ground forces advancing in coordinated waves. Everything by the book. Everything that had worked against 17 other species. And the human response?" Zethka's voice grew darker. "For the first hour, they fought exactly as we expected. They held their defensive positions, returned fire, and fell back in good order when pressed. Our commanders were pleased. This was warfare as we understood it." He began pacing again, more quickly this time. But then something changed. The humans started fighting differently. Not worse or better, just different. In ways that our computers could not predict. How so? They stopped acting like soldiers and started acting like hunters. Zethki explained. Small groups would break away from the main defensive lines and disappear into the surrounding countryside. Then they would attack us from behind, from the sides, from places we had already cleared. Velthorn made notes on her tablet. Guerrilla tactics are not unknown in galactic warfare, warrior. This was not guerrilla warfare, Commander, Zethka said firmly. This was something else entirely. The humans were not just avoiding our strength and attacking our weaknesses. They were making us fight the way they wanted us to fight. Explain. Zethka stopped pacing and gripped the edge of the witness table. Every time we advanced, we found exactly what we expected to find. Enemy positions, defensive works, weapons, caches. But every time we engaged these positions, humans would appear from completely different directions. He looked directly at Commander Velthorn. They were using our own tactical thinking against us. They knew we would attack the strongest defensive positions first, so they made those positions into traps. Give us a specific example. The grain elevator, Zethka said immediately. It was the tallest building in the settlement, perfect for snipers and observation posts. Our doctrine demanded that we capture it first, to prevent the humans from using it against us. And we sent a full company to take the building. 200 warriors with heavy weapons and air support. The humans defending it fought hard, just as we expected. It took us 3 hours to clear the building floor by floor. Zethka's voice became bitter. When we finally reached the top, we found exactly what we expected. Sniper rifles, communications equipment, maps of our positions. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. What do you mean? The maps were fake, Zethka explained. The communications equipment was sending false signals. The sniper rifles had been used, but not on us. They had been shooting at empty positions, making us think snipers were everywhere. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Commander Velthorn leaned forward. If the humans were not in the grain elevator, where were they? Underground, Zethka said. While we were focused on taking the most obvious target, they had moved through tunnels to positions behind our main force. When we finally realized what had happened, we were surrounded. Casualties? 73 warriors lost in the first ambush, Zethka said quietly. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. Continue. Zethka sat down heavily, his armor creaking. The humans did not try to wipe us out. They could have. We were trapped, confused, and separated from our support units. Instead, they started talking to us. Talking? Over our communication channels. Zethka explained. They knew our frequencies, our call signs, even the names of our officers. They started describing our positions, our equipment, our tactical situation, in perfect military language. Velthorn's 3 eyes widened. They were demonstrating their intelligence capabilities. More than that, Zethka said. They were showing us that they understood us better than we understood them. They knew how we thought, how we planned, how we would react to different situations. What did they want? Colonel Murphy contacted our regimental commander directly, Zethka remembered. He offered to let us withdraw from the township without further casualties. All we had to do was leave behind our heavy weapons and vehicles. A reasonable offer under the circumstances. It was, Zethka agreed, but our commander refused. He was angry about being outmaneuvered by what he called primitive farmers. He ordered us to fight our way out and destroy the township in the process. And did you succeed? Zethka's mandibles clicked rapidly. We tried. For 2 days and nights, we tried to break out of the encirclement. But every move we made, the humans were ready for us. Every route we chose, they had already blocked. Every tactic we used, they had already countered. How was this possible? They had been watching us for weeks, Zethka said, studying our behavior, learning our patterns, understanding our weaknesses. Not just our military weaknesses, but our psychological ones. He stood up again, his chains rattling. On the second night, something happened that broke our morale completely. A human female, barely 18 years old, walked into our command post carrying a white flag. A negotiator? Her name was Lisa Rodriguez, Zethka said, his voice filled with something that might have been admiration. She was not a soldier. She worked in the township's medical clinic. But she walked past our sentries, through our defensive lines, and directly to our commanding officer. How did she get past your security? She did not sneak past, Zethka explained. She walked, openly, in full view of our guards. When they tried to stop her, she showed them a document written in perfect Vraxian military script. It was a safe passage order signed by Colonel Murphy. Vel Thorne made more notes. What did she want? She offered to treat our wounded, Zethka said. She said the humans had medical supplies and wanted to help our injured warriors. In exchange, she asked for permission to evacuate the township's children to safety. And your commander's response? Zethka's voice became very quiet. He laughed at her. He said humans were too primitive to understand proper medical treatment. He told her that when we broke out of the encirclement, we would kill every human in the township, including the children. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the translation devices seemed to pause in their work. What did the human female do? Vel Thorne asked. She looked at our commander for a long moment, Zethka remembered. Then she said something that still haunts me. She said, Colonel Murphy thought you might feel that way. He asked me to give you this. What was it? The council chamber remained eerily quiet as Zethka gathered his thoughts. His four arms moved restlessly against his restraints, and several of the alien council members noticed how his chitinous armor seemed to have lost its natural luster. The proud Vraxian warrior who had entered this chamber looked far older than his years. Commander Vel Thorne waited patiently, her silver fingers drumming silently on her tablet. She had read the preliminary reports about what happened at Firebase Delta, but she needed to hear it from someone who had been there, someone who had survived. Warrior Zethka, she said gently, your report mentions a third engagement. Firebase Delta. Can you tell us about that battle? Zethka's large black eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, they seemed to be looking at something very far away. Firebase Delta was supposed to be different, Commander. After our failures at New Haven and Riverside, our High Command decided to change tactics completely. How so? No. More ground assaults against defended positions, Zethka explained. No more attempts to capture territory or civilians. Firebase Delta was going to be a simple military operation. Find the human soldiers, destroy them, and move on. He shifted. In his chair, his chains clinking softly. Our intelligence had located a human military outpost in the northern mountains. 43 human soldiers, cut off from their main forces and running low on supplies. It should have been exactly what we needed to restore our confidence. What made this target seem more suitable? Everything about it made sense, Zethka said. The base was built on high ground with clear fields of fire. The humans had proper military equipment, uniforms, and ranks. Their commander was a career officer named Captain Amy Foster. Finally, we thought, we would face real soldiers instead of civilians with weapons. Commander Vel Thorne made notes on her tablet. How large was the force sent to attack Firebase Delta? An entire regiment, Zethka replied. 800 warriors, supported by artillery and airstrikes. We also had orbital bombardment available if needed. The battle computers calculated total victory within 2 hours. And the reality? Zethka's mandibles began to click rapidly. The siege lasted 6 days. Commander, 6 days that broke the minds of warriors who had fought across 17 star systems. Explain what made this battle different. Zethka stood up and began his familiar pacing pattern. We approached Firebase Delta, expecting a conventional military. Engagement. Fortified positions, organized defense, clear tactical objectives. What we found was something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. In what way? The humans had turned their own base into a weapon against us. ZFK said, not just the buildings and equipment, but their own bodies, their own minds, their own deaths. He stopped pacing and faced the tribunal. Captain Foster knew she could not win a conventional battle against 800 warriors, so she decided not to fight a conventional battle. What did she do instead? She made us fight 800 different battles, Sethka explained. Every room in every building became a separate battlefield. Every corridor was a trap. Every door was a decision between life and death. Commander Velthorn leaned forward. Can you give us specific examples? The first thing we noticed was the sound, Sethka said. Constant noise coming from the base. Weapons fire, explosions, voices shouting orders. It sounded like they were fighting a major battle even before we arrived. Were they? No, Sethka said quietly. They were making recordings. Captain Foster had her soldiers create hours of battle sounds, then played them through speakers hidden throughout the base. We spent the first day trying to locate enemies who were not there. Psychological warfare. More than that, Sethka insisted. They were teaching us to doubt our own senses. Every sound we heard might be real or fake. Every movement we saw might be a soldier or a decoy. Every decision we made might be based on false information. He resumed his pacing, heavy footsteps echoing in the chamber. The humans slept in 20-minute shifts, with different groups making noise at different times. They created the impression of a force, 3 times their actual size, all working around the clock. How did your forces respond? We became exhausted, Sethka admitted. My warriors were trained for quick, decisive battles, not extended sieges. After 48 hours without proper rest, they started making mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Shooting at shadows, Sethka said, calling for artillery strikes on empty buildings, abandoning positions because they heard enemies that were not there. Captain Foster was not just defending her base, she was attacking our minds. Commander Velthorn made more notes. But surely your superior numbers and firepower gave you some advantage? You would think so, Sethka replied. But the humans used our strength against us. Every time we brought heavy weapons to bear on a position, they would retreat through tunnels and appear somewhere else. More tunnel networks? Not just tunnels, Sethka explained. They had connected every building to natural cave systems in the mountains. The base was not just sitting on the high ground. It was part of the mountain itself. He stopped pacing and gripped the witness table. On the 3rd day, we thought we had finally cornered Captain Foster and her command staff in the main bunker. We brought up our biggest weapons and prepared to end the siege. What happened? The bunker exploded, Sethka said simply. But not from our weapons. The humans had rigged their own command center with explosives. When we breached the walls, they detonated everything, killing themselves. We thought so, Sethka said. But 6 hours later, Captain Foster contacted US on our command frequency. She was alive, somewhere else in the base, still giving orders to her soldiers. The council chamber fell silent, except for the soft sound of translation devices working. Several alien delegates looked confused, trying to understand how this was possible. How had she survived? Velthorn asked. The command bunker had been a decoy, Sethka explained. The real command post was hidden in the natural caves below the base. But more than that, Captain Foster had trained every one of her soldiers to act as commanders. I do not understand. Every human soldier knew the complete defensive plan, Sethka said. Every soldier could give orders and make tactical decisions. When we killed their officers, new leaders immediately took their place. When we destroyed their communications, they used backup systems we did not even know existed. He began pacing again, more quickly now. On the fourth day, something happened that still haunts my dreams. A human soldier, a young male named Danny Carter, was trapped alone in a supply depot when we overran the position. What made this significant? He held us off for 4 hours, Sethka said. One human, barely 20 years old, against 40 seasoned Vraxian warriors. He used every piece of equipment in that depot as a weapon. How is that possible? He turned maintenance tools into explosive devices, Sethka explained. He used cleaning chemicals to create toxic gas. He rigged supply containers to fall on our warriors when they entered the building. Every few minutes, he would appear in a different window, fire a few shots, and disappear again. Where was he moving to? Air ducts, Sethka said. The humans had modified their own ventilation systems to create hidden passages throughout the base. Carter was not just fighting us. He was teaching us that every part of their base was dangerous. Commander Vel Thorne looked up from her notes. What finally happened to this soldier? We never captured him, Sethka admitted. After 4 hours, the depot fell silent. When we finally entered, we found evidence that he had escaped through the air ducts to another part of the base. And he continued fighting? For 2 more days, Sethka said. Every time we thought we had cleared a section of the base, Carter would appear and attack us from behind. He was like a ghost, always moving, always fighting, never giving up. What about the other human soldiers? They were all like Carter, Sethka said, his voice filled with something that might have been admiration. There was a female medic, named Kelly Hayes, who continued treating wounded humans even after her medical station was destroyed. Where was she treating them? In the tunnels, Sethka explained. She had set up a complete field hospital in the caves below the base. But, more than that, she was treating our wounded warriors too. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Commander Vel Thorne raised her hand for silence. She was treating Vraxian soldiers? Any wounded warrior who made it to her position, Sethka confirmed. She would patch them up, give them medical supplies, and send them back to our lines. With messages. What kind of messages? Medical information about our own wounded, Sethka said. Advice on treating injuries we did not know how to handle. Offers to exchange medical supplies. She was trying to reduce casualties on both sides. What was your command's response? Sethka's mandibles clicked slowly. They ordered us to capture her for interrogation. They thought she might have valuable intelligence about human medical capabilities. And did you succeed? We tried, Sethka said quietly. On the 6th day, we finally located her field hospital. 12 warriors surrounded the cave entrance. We demanded her surrender. Her response? She asked for 10 minutes to stabilize the patients she was treating, Sethka said, both human and Vraxian wounded. She said she could not leave them to die. The silence in the council chamber had become heavy and uncomfortable. Many of the alien delegates shifted in their seats, clearly disturbed by what they had heard so far. Commander Vel Thorne noticed that some of the younger council members looked pale, their various skin colors drained of their natural brightness. Sethka remained motionless in his chair, staring at his bound hands. The proud warrior who had entered this chamber now looked like a broken soldier haunted by memories. He could not escape. When he finally looked up, his large black eyes held a depth of fear that made several council members uncomfortable. Warrior Sethka, Commander Vel Thorne said softly, I know this testimony is difficult for you, but we need to understand what happened next. Your reports mention something called the Battle of Iron Ridge. Sethka's mandibles clicked once, very slowly. Iron Ridge was where we learned that everything we had experienced before was just the humans being gentle with us. Gentle? They had been holding back, Commander, Zethka said, his voice barely above a whisper. At New Haven, Riverside, and Firebase Delta, the humans were still trying to minimize casualties. They were still fighting like a civilized species. He stood up slowly, his chains scraping against the metal chair. Iron Ridge was where they stopped being civilized. Commander Velthorn made notes on her tablet, though her hands trembled slightly. What made Iron Ridge different from the previous battles? The location, Zethka said. Iron Ridge was not a farming community or a military outpost. It was an industrial center. 30,000 humans lived there, working in mines and factories that process raw materials for their space program. And the strategic importance? If we could capture Iron Ridge, we would control the humans' ability to manufacture weapons. And equipment, Zethka explained. Our High Command decided this would be the decisive battle of the war. How large was the Vraxian force? 2 full divisions, Zethka said. 15,000 warriors, supported by orbital bombardment platforms. And atmospheric fighters. We also brought industrial equipment to strip the factories and mines for our own use. He began his familiar pacing pattern, but slower now, as if the memories weighed him down. The human commander was Lieutenant Colonel Steve Adams. He was younger than the other officers we had faced, maybe 35 standard years old. Our intelligence said he had no experience with large-scale defensive operations. What was your initial assessment? We thought it would be our easiest victory, Zethka admitted. Iron Ridge was built in a valley surrounded by mountains. The humans could not retreat, could not use tunnel networks like before, and could not hide their industrial infrastructure. But that assessment proved incorrect. Completely wrong, Zethka said. Colonel Adams had turned the entire industrial complex into the largest weapon ever created. Commander Velthorn looked up from her notes. Explain what you mean by that. He had been preparing for months, Zethka said. Every factory, every mine, every piece of equipment had been modified for warfare. But not just to produce weapons. The entire industrial system had become a weapon itself. How is that possible? Zethka stopped pacing and faced the tribunal. The humans flooded the lower mine shafts with water from mountain streams, creating underground rivers that could be released to wash away attacking forces. They filled factory storage tanks with industrial chemicals that could be mixed to create toxic clouds. Chemical weapons? Not weapons, Commander, Zethka corrected. Industrial accidents that could be triggered at will. If we attacked the chemical plant, the humans would open the wrong valves and create poisonous gas. If we approached the power station, they would overload the reactors and cause explosive failures. Commander Velthorn made more notes. Surely your forces were equipped to handle industrial hazards? We were, Zethka said. But Colonel Adams was not just using the industrial equipment. He was using the industrial workers. The civilian population? There were no civilians at Iron Ridge, Zethka said, his voice growing darker. Every human in that valley, from the youngest children to the oldest workers, had been given specific tasks in the defense plan. Children were involved in the fighting? Not fighting, Zethka said. Operating. 10-year-old humans were running communication equipment with the skill of trained technicians. 12-year-old humans were monitoring industrial systems and coordinating chemical releases. 15-year-old humans were piloting mining equipment that had been turned into armored vehicles. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several alien delegates stood up and began talking in loud voices. Commander Velthorn had to call for order multiple times before the noise subsided. This is highly irregular military behavior, she said. Once quiet returned. How did your forces respond to children operating military equipment? We could not respond, Sefka said. Our warriors are trained to fight soldiers, not children. When a 10-year-old human appeared on our communications frequency with tactical information, our officers did not know how to react. What kind of tactical information? Complete intelligence about our force positions, Zethka explained. These children were watching us through industrial cameras, tracking our movements through mining sensors, and coordinating defensive responses through factory computer networks. He resumed pacing, his movements more agitated now. But the worst part was that they were completely calm about it. These human children spoke to us like seasoned military professionals, giving orders and making tactical decisions without any fear. How did this affect your warriors? It broke their morale, Zethka said simply. My soldiers are trained to fight honorable enemies. But how do you fight an enemy that uses its own children as weapons operators? Did Colonel Adams give any explanation for these tactics? He contacted our divisional commander directly. Zethka remembered. He said the humans were not using child soldiers. He said they were using their entire civilization as a military force. Commander Velthorn set down her tablet. What did he mean by that? Every human at Iron Ridge had grown up learning to operate industrial equipment, Sefka explained. The mining equipment, the chemical plants, the computer networks. For them, turning these systems into weapons was not military training. It was just using familiar tools in a new way. And the children? They had grown up playing with the same computer systems they were now using to track our forces, Sefka said. For them, it was not warfare. It was just a very serious game. The chamber fell silent again. Zethka could see the expressions of horror and disbelief on the faces of the council members. They were beginning to understand the true scope of what humanity was capable of. Continue with your account of the battle, Commander Velthorn said finally. We began our assault at dawn on the 7th day after arriving, Zethka said. Standard. Bombardment followed by ground assault. But as soon as our forces moved into the valley, the humans began their response. Which was? They turned off all the lights, Zethka said. Every factory, every building, every streetlight in the entire valley went dark simultaneously. Then they began releasing industrial chemicals into the air. Creating a smoke screen? Creating a poisonous fog that our sensors could not penetrate, Sefka corrected. Our warriors had to fight in complete darkness while breathing filtered air through their protective equipment. Surely your technology gave you some advantage? The humans had been studying our technology for months, Zethka said. They knew the capabilities and limitations of our sensors, our communications, our weapons. Every piece of equipment we brought to Iron Ridge had been countered before we even arrived. How could they have such detailed knowledge? They had been capturing our equipment since the war began, Zethka explained. Every battle, every skirmish, every engagement had been a learning opportunity for them. By the time we reached Iron Ridge, they understood our technology better than we did. He stopped pacing and gripped the witness table. On the 2nd day of the battle, something happened that still gives me nightmares. What occurred? A human medical team entered our field hospital, Zethka said. They walked past our guards, through our defensive lines, and began treating our wounded warriors. Another negotiation attempt? No, Commander, Zethka said. They were led by a human female named Dr. Ellen Price. She was not a soldier. She was a civilian doctor who worked at the industrial medical facility. What did she want? To save lives, Zethka said simply. She said too many soldiers on both sides were dying from treatable injuries. She offered to share human medical knowledge in exchange for permission to treat wounded humans in our secure areas. And your commander's response? He agreed, Zethka said. Our medical officers were impressed by human surgical techniques. Dr. Price and her team were saving warriors that our own doctors could not help. This seems reasonable. It was a trap, Zethka said, his voice filled with admiration and horror. Dr. Price was not just treating our wounded. She was studying our biology, learning about our anatomy, and discovering our physical weaknesses. She was conducting medical research during the battle. More than that, Zethka said. She was teaching the other humans how to fight us more effectively. Every piece of medical information she gathered was being used to develop new weapons and tactics. The council chamber had grown cold during Zethka's testimony. Many of the alien delegates had wrapped themselves in their ceremonial robes, though the temperature had not actually changed. The chill came from something deeper, something that touched the very core of how they understood warfare and civilization. Commander Vel Thorn studied her notes for a long moment before looking back at the broken Vraxian warrior. Her 3 eyes blinked slowly, as if she was trying to process information that her mind did not want to accept. Warrior Zethka, she said carefully, you mentioned that the humans showed you recordings of their response to attacks on other worlds. This was the continuing education about human warfare. Zethka nodded slowly, his 4 arms trembling against his restraints. General Patrick Sullivan came to our detention facility personally. He said he wanted us to understand why. The war was about to end. General Sullivan was the overall human commander? Yes, Commander, Zethka replied. He was an older human, maybe 60 standard years, with white hair and scars from many battles. But his eyes were different from the other human officers we had met. Different how? They were sad, Zethka said. Deeply, terribly sad. As if he was about to show us something that hurt him as much as it would hurt us. Commander Vel Thorn made notes on her tablet. What did General Sullivan tell you about these recordings? He said that everything we had experienced on Kepler 7 was what humans called limited engagement. Zethka explained. The colonies we had attacked were small settlements with no strategic importance to the human government. And the significance of this? He said that our high command had made a critical error, Zethka continued. They had interpreted human restraint as human weakness. They had decided to attack Earth itself. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Several council members stood up, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound. Commander Vel Thorn called for order multiple times before the noise subsided. The Vraxian Empire attempted to invade the human homeworld? She asked. 3 full battle fleets, Zethka confirmed. Over 100,000 warriors, supported by planetary bombardment ships and invasion transports. It was the largest military operation in Vraxian history. And General Sullivan wanted you to witness the human response? Zethka's mandibles clicked slowly. He said he wanted us to understand the difference between humans defending their colonies and humans defending their home. Show us the first recording, General Sullivan had said to the Vraxian prisoners. The screen had lit up with images from space around Earth. Zethka remembered watching the Vraxian fleet approach the small blue planet, confident in their overwhelming superiority. What did you see in these recordings? Commander Vel Thorn asked. At first, everything proceeded as expected, Zethka said. Our fleets encountered minimal resistance from human orbital defenses. A few old space stations, some patrol ships, nothing that could stop a force of our size. The humans seemed unprepared. That is what we thought, Zethka said. Our fleet commanders were pleased. They began broadcasting surrender demands to the human government, expecting quick capitulation. And the human response? Zethka's voice became very quiet. A single message, broadcast on all frequencies. Just 4 words. You have awakened Earth. What did that mean? We found out very quickly, Zethka said. Within minutes of that broadcast, things began happening that our battle computers could not explain. Such as? human civilian ships began emerging from every spaceport on Earth, Zethka explained. Not military vessels, but cargo haulers, passenger transports, even small personal craft. Thousands and thousands of ships, all heading directly toward our fleets. Commander Velthorn stopped taking notes. Civilian ships attacking military forces? Not attacking, Zethka corrected. Ramming. Every human ship had been loaded with explosives and was piloted by volunteers. They were turning their entire civilian space fleet into guided missiles. Suicide attacks? The humans called it something else, Zethka said. General Sullivan explained that on Earth, when the survival of their species was threatened, every human became a soldier. Every tool became a weapon. Every ship became a missile. How effective were these tactics? Our first battle fleet lost 60% of its ships in the first hour, Zethka said. Not to military action, but to civilian cargo ships crashing into our hulls at maximum velocity. Surely your remaining forces were able to respond? They tried, Zethka said. But the human attacks were coordinated by something our intelligence had never detected. Which was? Every human on Earth was connected through their communication networks, Zethka explained. Not just their military, but every civilian, every child, every elderly person. They were all receiving tactical information and contributing to the whole defense effort. Zethka stood up and began pacing again, but his movements were different now. Less agitated, more thoughtful, as if he was trying to understand something that still puzzled him. General Sullivan showed us recordings from inside human homes during the battle, he said. Families sitting around communication devices, tracking our ship movements and calculating optimal ram trajectories for civilian pilots. Entire families were involved in military planning. Children as young as 8 were operating computer programs that analyzed our fleet formations, Zethka said. Elderly humans were using their knowledge of space navigation to guide suicide ships to their targets. Everyone was part of the same coordinated defense. What happened to your second battle fleet? They never reached Earth, Zethka said. Somewhere between Mars and Earth, they encountered something that should not have been possible. Explain. A barrier, Zethka said simply. A wall of debris and explosives that stretched across the entire approach route to Earth. The humans had been building it for months, using materials from asteroid mining operations. A space-based fortification? More than that, Zethka said. It was a weapon that used the entire solar system as its foundation. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris had been turned into part of a defensive network. Commander Velthorn made more notes. How long had the humans been preparing this defense? According to General Sullivan, they began construction the day after our first attack on their colonies, Zethka said. While we were fighting farmers and miners on distant worlds, the humans were turning their home system into a fortress. And your third battle fleet? Zethka's voice became barely audible. They encountered the human home defense fleet. How large was this fleet? Every ship that Earth had ever built, Zethka said. Military vessels, exploration ships, research craft, even historical vessels that had been in museums. All of them had been retrofitted for warfare and crewed by volunteers. How many ships? Over 10,000, Zethka said. But that was not the terrifying part. The terrifying part was that every ship was piloted by humans who had spent their entire lives learning to operate in space. Professional spacers? Miners, explorers, scientists, traders, Zethka explained. Humans who knew every asteroid, every gravity well, every hiding place in their solar system. They fought like the space around Earth was their home, because it was the outcome of this battle. Our third fleet was destroyed completely, Zethka said. But more than that, the humans captured our fleet commander alive and sent him back to Vraxian space with a message. What message? That everything we had seen was just Earth defending itself, Zethka said. If the war continued, the humans would bring the fight to Vraxian worlds. And they had learned everything they needed to know about our capabilities. From 8 months of warfare, Commander Velthorn set down her tablet. What happened next? General Sullivan came to see us personally, Zethka remembered. He said the war could end in one of two ways. Either the Vraxian Empire could agree to immediate peace negotiations, or humanity would demonstrate what they called total warfare. Total warfare? He showed us the final recording, Zethka said. Images from a human facility called the Strategic Planning Center. Thousands of humans working together to analyze every piece of information they had gathered about Vraxian civilization. What kind of information? Everything, Zethka said. Our technology, our psychology, our culture, our weaknesses. They had spent the entire war learning about us while we failed to learn about them. And their intentions? General Sullivan said that if the war continued, humanity would not just fight Vraxian military forces, Zethka explained. They would target our food production, our communication networks, our civilian infrastructure. They would turn every aspect of Vraxian civilization into a battlefield. A total war against your entire species? He said they had identified 12,000 separate targets across Vraxian space, Zethka said. Not military targets, but anything that supported Vraxian civilization. Power plants, schools, hospitals, farms, everything. Commander Velthorn leaned forward. He was threatening genocide? No, Commander, Zethka said firmly. He was threatening something worse. He was threatening to reduce Vraxian civilization to the same level of desperation that humans had experienced. To make us fight for our survival the way they had fought for theirs. What was your government's response?